Welcome back to Leadership Trailblazers. I'm Lois Burton, Executive Coach and Leadership Development Specialist, and I'm your host. On a previous episode, we talked about the 4 qualities of the trailblazing leader: adaptability, resilience, courage, and empathy. And if you missed it, please do feel free to go back and listen to that, because that's when I described what those qualities were and gave you some stories about how people had used them. But on this episode, as promised, I'm going to do a deep dive into practical tips on how you can use these on a daily basis in your leadership life. So they're going to be 8 tips in total, 2 for each of the quality. And you're going to be able to use these straight away. So let's start with adaptability. So the first tip is run a weekly what's changed check-in with yourself. Once a week, 10 minutes, ask yourself 3 questions. What's changed in this week that I need to pay attention to? What assumptions am I working from? Are they still accurate? What might I need to do differently? It interrupts the pattern of leading on autopilot. Adaptable leaders pay better attention. So they're not necessarily working smarter or faster or making decisions faster, but they're paying close attention to what's going on for themselves and how that translates into the decisions they're making. Tip 2, practice the art of the curious question. Stop leading with your answer and start leading with your question. In the previous episode, I talked about a client of mine, we're calling her Sarah, and that one thing that shifted for her was that she stopped telling her team what she thought they should do, and she started asking them what they thought. So simple, but very, very powerful. Because your brain will have already decided what you think should be done. And that's not a flaw, that's experience. But leading with your answer shuts down the information that might change your approach, and also shuts down your team. So practice asking before stating. Not here's what we're doing, but what's your read on this? What do you think? Not the approach about, this isn't working, but what do you think is working and what isn't working? And then genuinely listen and be willing to update your thinking. Great adaptable leaders have strong opinions, but they are loosely held. They're confident enough to have a view, but they're humble enough to change it. A couple of tips now on resilience. First of all, build a daily recovery ritual and protect it. Resilience is not built in crisis. It's built in everyday recovery. Small, consistent practices that regulate your nervous system and keep your prefrontal cortex working well for you. What it looks like can vary. Not the same routine isn't going to work for everyone. So you might need to experiment with this a bit. Could be something like 20-minute lunchtime walk, 10 minutes journaling at the end of the day, shutting off your emails with discipline at 7 p.m. It doesn't matter so much what it is, but it matters that it's something you can do consistently. Because if you're chronically exhausted and reactive, you're depleted, not resilient, and you are not going to be making good decisions or showing up in the right way as a leader. Recovery isn't a luxury. It's part of your job. One of the things that I often see is leaders who will not give themselves permission for self-care. And it's really important that you do. So your action is pick one ritual this week, put it in the diary, treat it like your most important meeting, and let me know how you get on. So the second tip on resilience is learn to reframe, not deny. Reframing is not toxic positivity. It isn't plastering a smile over a difficulty. Reframing is consciously choosing a different question about a difficult situation. Instead of, why is this happening, which keeps you stuck, ask, what can we learn? What might be possible? And a very powerful question, what would I say to a colleague or friend? That's a question I often ask my coaches. What would you say to a colleague or friend if they were in this situation? Because actually, we're really good at advising others, not always so good at advising ourselves. So, in moments of pressure, think about, what would I tell my most trusted colleague or friend? It brings a different perspective. which then brings different thinking, which opens up different choices. And that's flexible thinking. That's resilience. So let's move on to empathy. So, empathy in practice. First tip, give people your full attention, even for 5 minutes. The most common piece of 360 feedback on senior leaders is that people say they don't feel like they're really listening. Leaders think they're listening, but they're not truly present. The practice when somebody comes into your office and needs to connect to you or ask you a question is be fully there for them. Phone down, laptop off, and make sure you've genuinely understood before you respond. A good coaching question to use is, what's the most important thing I should understand about this for you? Because this signals genuine interest and it slows the conversation, and it often surfaces something that changes everything. Full presence costs nothing but a little attention. Secondly, check in before you check up. Before you ask, where are we up to with the project? Ask, how are you doing? And mean it. Don't rush past the answers. Give it a moment to breathe. It's easy to say, I don't have time. We don't have time in a team meeting to do that check-in. We've got so much to get through on the agenda. But that 2 minutes can save hours of managing the fallout. Many of my coachees and the teams that I work with have successfully incorporated this ritual into their team meetings, and they all admit it does make a difference. You do have to build in more time for it, but it will save you time. Trust me. When people feel genuinely cared for, more engaged, more productive, they flag problems early and they're part of the solution rather than trying to cover them up, trying to fix it themselves. And then when you do come to that problem, it's a much bigger job to fix it. Empathy is not soft, it's smart. How are you doing? Genuinely asked, genuinely received, one of the most powerful questions that there is. So for the fourth one, we're looking at courage in practice. First tip on this, have the conversation you've been avoiding. Think about a conversation you've been putting off. Almost everyone has one. The feedback that needs giving, the boundary that needs setting, the honest truth about a situation. Courageous leadership shows up in ordinary, daily moments and chooses honesty over comfort. So frame the difficult conversation. Get clear on 3 things. What outcome do I genuinely want for both of us? What's the most respectful and honest way to open? What am I afraid of? And is that fear proportionate? Our brains catastrophize and imagine the worst reaction and then treat it as the most likely reaction. Often the dreaded conversation goes much better than you expect, is over in about 20 minutes, and both of you feel better. Courage is usually less dangerous than avoidance. Several years ago, a trusted colleague and friend of mine, Deborah, you've heard me talk about her before, we conducted a little experiment of our own. This was just anecdotal. So with the people that we were coaching and the groups that we were with, we asked the question, how many people have got a conversation that they've been avoiding? 97% of the people that we asked that question of said that they had. And we then asked the question, has the situation got better or worse through avoiding that conversation? And 81% of people said it had actually got worse. Because we put it off and just hope it'll get better. It doesn't. So please, start having those conversations that you're avoiding. I'm sure they'll go much better than you anticipate that they will. Finally, make a decision and own it. Talked to you before about stop waiting for certainty before you lead. You'll rarely have 100% information or 100% certainty. It's a myth. And waiting for the 100% is procrastination dressed up as prudence. Make the best decision you can with the information you've got and then communicate it clearly and own it. Not hedging, not qualifying, not leaving every door open. How you own it matters as much as the decision itself. Clarity, rationale, and openness, and the team feels safe, even with difficult news. Now, I just want to put one caveat in here because I can hear a few people might be saying, yeah, but how does that sit with the flexible thinking you've talked about? You can always say, if the situation changes or if we get different information, we will review this decision. But that doesn't stop you making the decision and going forward with it confidently. And 80% of the time, those decisions will be right. Ambiguity erodes trust, and particularly during uncertainty. Whereas actually, if you're willing to be decisive, that builds trust, but decisive in an open way that demonstrates that you've thought it through. So, again, a question and a challenge. What decision have you been sitting on? 80% is enough. Make the call. So, quick recap. 8 tips for putting those 4 qualities into practice. For adaptability, weekly check-in and lead with curious questions. For resilience, daily recovery ritual and practice reframing. Empathy, full presence and check in before you check up. Courage, have the avoided conversation, make the call on the decision and own it. Pick one this week. Implement it consistently and notice what shifts. Thank you so much for being here again. If you found the episode helpful, please share it with a leader who needs it or will benefit. If you'd like to carry on the conversation or go deeper, please find me on LinkedIn or loisburtononline.com. And until next time, keep trailblazing.